nice smile. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I see lovely smiles everywhere. That's wonderful. Smiling people. We waited just a little bit because the traffic was brutal out there. I don't know how many of you just got here, but it was, I don't know what was going on, but it was hard to get here. But now it's time to start. Good evening, Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us for An Evening with Audrey. I am Wes Roberts, the executive publisher of SRQ Media. And I get to welcome you to the Mildred Sainer Pavilion here at New College, which is a great stage. I love this stage. I have experienced a lot of wonderful programming and exciting things on the stage and from the audience, and so I am glad to be here tonight. I know it's going to be a great evening. There are a lot of celebrities, but few icons. Names come and go from the public consciousness with an constantly increasing rapidity. But some names stick, some stay. And even better, some of those names, some of our heroes, turn out to be worthy of the title, hero. Audrey Hepburn is one of those heroes. A fashion icon, a screen legend, a passionate humanitarian. Her supernova brightness left a mark on our cultural awareness. Tonight, we will get an insider's glimpse into the life, the humanity of this much-beloved woman, devoted mother, and force for good. Before we get started, I need to recognize New College of Florida for hosting us, especially our great partners there, Donald O'Shea, Marianne Young, and Sarah Walcott-Febish, and so many more I am sure that we do not know. We are so grateful for your generosity and your continued support of SRQ Magazine. Please put your hands together for our generous hosts. I'm about to invite SRQ's Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, Ashley Grant, to the stage. Without Ashley's drive and fire, this event and many other programs that SRQ does to help and to better our community would not exist. A rare light herself, please warmly welcome Ashley to the lectern. Come here, Ashley. Before I give her the microphone, I have got to say this. Did you get question cards when you came in? Okay, yes. Are you filling them out? Have you filled them out yet? Are you working on them? Okay. As you entered, you were given question cards. After the initial presentation, Ashley's going to come back to the stage. These two chairs are not for you guys. You're not supposed to come up and sit here. This is for a Q&A that Ashley will do with our honored guest. We would love for you to participate. The way you do so is fill out a question card. It's called a question card because normally we're using them for a political debate or something like that with SRQ programming. I think tonight we would be more open to anything that you thought you wanted to share. It could be a thought, could be an anecdote. There might be something that touches you about tonight's presentation that you wanted to put into the discussion. So write that down. There won't be a whole lot of time to squeeze them in, but I'm sure something special will come out of it. And after that, let me turn it over to Ashley Grant. Thank you, Ashley.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy you all have joined us tonight, and I am thrilled to be able to introduce my dear friend Pamela to share her thoughts on Audrey with you. The presentation this evening is part of SRQ Women in Business Initiative's commitment to celebrate extraordinary women, their accomplishments, and contributions. And this evening, we will hear from one of those incredible women as she celebrates another one. A publishing icon and barometer of style and grace, Pamela Fiori is the former editor-in-chief of Town & Country and Travel + Leisure magazines, a 6-time published author, recipient of the Matrix Award for Journalism, the Audrey Hepburn Humanitarian Award from UNICEF, and the SRQ Trailblazer Award, among many others. During her editorship of Town & Country, Pamela covered Audrey Hepburn frequently, has written about her many times, as recently as in the September 2017 Harper's Bazaar UK edition, and as a result of her time spent with them, has become very close to Audrey Hepburn's family. She is the quintessential go-to expert on all things Audrey. Tonight, Pamela will present an intimate portrait of this extraordinary woman and the impact she continues to have on all of us. Please give a warm SRQ welcome to Pamela Fiori.
Wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style.
I won't wear these all evening long, I promise you. And for good reason. Because not only can I not see, but it's going to take more than a pair of oversized sunglasses, long black gloves, a little black dress, and a bit of bling to approximate Audrey Hepburn. So ladies, don't try this at home. And gentlemen, don't even think about it. Let's start with her almond-shaped eyes, those arched eyebrows, her high cheekbones. When she was in the movies, except for when she was in Nun's Story, she usually wore false eyelashes. She had an elegant swan-like neck. She had perfect posture because she trained to be a dancer. She had poise, she had height, she was about 5'8", and she had depth. So now we're going to go inside and under her skin to get at the real Audrey Hepburn. Her kindness, her gentility, her generous spirit, her sweet disposition, her compassion, her sense of what's right and what's wrong. We could use her now. Her passion for those she loved and what mattered most to her. And all that she did in her determination to make the world a better place for children when she worked with UNICEF, not only her own children, but the children the world over who were living in the most desperate, dangerous places. She had inner beauty, she had transcendental talent, and incomparable charm, and last but not least, she had a warm and an open heart. So I'm going to show you a few images. I have a confession to make. I never met Audrey Hepburn. But like many of you in this room, I saw all of her movies, often more than once. I read everything I could about her. I was a great admirer of her work with UNICEF. Eventually, I became involved with UNICEF, and I was on the board for almost 12 years. And she, I think, for many of us, was a woman that had our admiration and affection. She resonated a kind of intelligence and a kind of stability that you don't see very often in Hollywood actors. And at that time, here was this tall, skinny girl at a time when the idols were Marilyn Monroe and Mamie Van Doren and Jane Mansfield and others. And she came along weighing probably 104 pounds and captivated everyone. She had a very good friend in the French designer Hubert de Givenchy. And he said about her, "There is not a woman alive who does not dream of looking like Audrey Hepburn." And I would simply add to that, not only dream of looking like her, but dressing like her, sounding like her, behaving like her. The man that she lived with during the last 13 years of his life said that there used to be women all the time who would come up to him and profess to them that they were the next Audrey Hepburn. And he would say, "There is no next Audrey Hepburn." Even when she wore no makeup, she looked great. Now, there were two other women in my years at Town and Country. I became editor in 1993 in May, which was a few months after Audrey died in January 1993. But there were two other women who were icons. One of them was Jackie Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, who died in 1994. And when she died, we did something that I never thought I would ever do or say: stop the presses. So we stopped the presses, and we added in our July issue a 26-page insert, which was a tribute to her. This cover represents everything that you should not do in magazines. It is a black and white cover. Black and white covers do not sell. She is not looking into the camera, so there's no eye contact. And for a town and country woman, she's not really very well dressed. She's wearing a shirt and jeans, khakis, and yet this was one of our best-selling covers ever. We did a tribute to her. I wrote this piece about her, having just met her a few weeks before she died, and if there's time for questions later on, I can tell you what that was like. Here she is as a young girl. Even then, she was very fetching. The other woman was Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly was born in this area outside of Philadelphia. She was very patrician-looking, beautiful blonde, coolly elegant. She had enormous talent. She wasn't in all that many films, but the ones she was in were memorable from High Noon on. She won an Oscar for her role in The Country Girl, and oddly enough, it was not one of her most glamorous roles. She played the kind of put-upon wife of a man who was a failing drunkard, and that was played by Bing Crosby. And that's what she won her Academy Award for. This, I love this photograph of her because she looks like a mermaid who has just come from the sea. She was in a movie that was called To Catch a Thief, and was filmed on the French Riviera. And it was when she was doing the preparation for the film that she met her husband-to-be, Prince Rainier of Monaco. He was a long-time bachelor, man about town, and he took her for a walk in the gardens of the palace in Monaco, and they fell in love. This was in 1955, and in 1956 they married, and she became a princess for real. This was a fashion story that we did in that same issue, and we asked the model Carolyn Murphy, who many of you have seen in ads, to play the part of Audrey in a fashion story. But again, you can't come close to Audrey. And no one did. Not Jackie, not Babe Paley, not Grace Kelly, nobody. This was a special issue that we did on the 10th anniversary of her death. Here she is with her first cover. This is for Life magazine in 1953, What Makes Audrey Charm. And again, look at how simply she's dressed. She's not wearing anything fancy at all. This is a cover for Time magazine. The background is a drawing of the Fountain of Trevi for her role in Roman Holiday. It was her first starring role in a major film, and her co-star, Gregory Peck, insisted, because he thought she was so good, that she be given a top billing with him. And guess what? She won the Oscar, her first role. And People magazine and other magazines have been covering her ever since. This was as recently as September, in preparation for the auction at Christie's in London. There were several of her clothing, jewelry, scripts that were auctioned, including the script for Breakfast at Tiffany with her writing on it. which sold for almost $900,000. This was her first cover for Harper's Bazaar. She did a lot of work with the photographer Richard Avedon. And this was his first. I mean, I just love her in this big, oversized hat. And they worked on many, many, many stories. Here she is in a piece for Architectural Digest. Sorry, let me go back to that. Oh, you'll see what this is. She is very beloved in Asia, especially in Japan. And her son, Luca Dotti, just came back from China because they did the second of 2 exhibitions about her. It's interesting, every time there's been an exhibition about Audrey Hepburn in Asia, and there have been, I think, 3 at this point, one in the Netherlands, there has never been one in the United States. And I think it is such a missed opportunity. And even cats want to look like Audrey Hepburn. I'm particularly fond of this one. It's really pretty adorable. Here is a poster for Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck. It was a great movie. If you haven't seen it, you must. And here she is with Peck. People have asked, were they lovers? No, they were just really good friends, and he helped her career enormously. This, of course, is the poster for Breakfast at Tiffany. Another great movie, and a great short story by Truman Capote. But Capote didn't want Audrey Hepburn to be in the movie. He wanted somebody else. Does anybody know who that was? You are so right, Marilyn Monroe. But Truman was wrong and she was right. Last March, I went to something at the what's now called the David Geffen Center at Lincoln Center, David Geffen Hall, and it was a replay of Breakfast at Tiffany's on a huge, huge screen with the New York Philharmonic playing the music by Henry Mancini. And it was a spectacular night, and Mancini's wife was there too. And I mean, to see that movie again and to see it played so beautifully was such a treat. Here she is with George Peppard. If you remember the story, she's this poor Southern girl who calls herself Holly Golightly, that's not her real name, is looking for men in all the wrong places, which is not so hard to do in a city like New York. But she finally finds, at the end of the movie, Mr. Right. This is a poster from Italy, which was called Colazione da Tiffany. She looked great in every pose she struck. This is from Breakfast at Tiffany also. And this was the scene in the movie when she was giving that party in her tiny little apartment with virtually no furniture in it, surrounded by a lot of sycophants. Here she is with Cary Grant. She was in not To Catch a Thief. She was in the movie that she played in with him was Charade, also music by Henry Mancini. When I look at this light-colored suit on him, I think, oh, poor Cary Grant, because when she met him, they met in Paris at a bistro, and he was wearing a suit very much like this, and she had a large glass of red wine, and she toppled over, all over his suit. And of course, being the gentleman he was, he just smiled, and I guess hightailed it to the nearest tailor that he could find. Here she is with William Holden. This was for a movie, Paris When It Sizzles. It was not a very good movie. It sort of fizzled out. But several years before, in the movie Sabrina, excuse me, they had a mad affair. And she wanted to marry him. But he was already married. She wanted children. He didn't want to have any more children. So that was the end of that. Here she is in How to Steal a Million with Peter O'Toole, a caper, a charming movie. And with Fred Astaire playing Richard Avedon in Funny Face. This was the most famous scene where they're coming down the steps of the Louvre, saying to Fred Astaire, "Take the picture, take the picture." This was her first husband, Mel Ferrer. It's not that I like this photograph. It's that I think it says everything about their relationship. He wanted her close to him. He wanted to domineer her, and did for a long time. And he was a kind of serial adulterer. And the marriage ended, but not before they had what she always wanted, which was a son. But his name is Sean Ferrer. This is the second. Andrea Dotti was an Italian psychiatrist, if such a thing exists. And this was on their wedding day. Like Mel Ferrer, he too was a serial adulterer, and she had just had it. They gave birth to a son, lived together for a while, but then she couldn't take it anymore, and they went their separate ways. There have been many, 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 many books about Audrey, and I'm not about to write one. But I've read most of them, and they all try to sort of make something up about her. But, you know, when you are married to a woman who was the subject of a postage stamp, as a man, you have to really wonder whether or not you can measure up. And I think that was really part of the problem. She was absolutely luminous. Here is a book called So Audrey, 59 Ways to Put a Little Hepburn in Your Set. This was all made up. I mean, nobody ever would have known what. And in fact, you could have said, do they mean Katharine Hepburn? Here she is looking kind of wistful. But her close-ups were really, these poses were really great. She was a bohemian here. There was another book called What Would Audrey Do? Well, this author's guess is as good as mine. The only person who would know what Audrey would do would be Audrey herself. But the book did pretty well. It's a small book, it's a gift book, and it's kind of fun to read. This was a major story in Harper's Bazaar that went on for 18 to 20 pages by Avedon again. And it takes place at a train station in Paris and then through the streets of Paris. And it was very, very cinematic. Here she is coming from the airport with her little dog. But her close-ups were remarkable. I mean, look at her. There isn't one where she doesn't look appealing in some way or glamorous. Or like a flower in full bloom. There was even a book called Audrey in Hats, and there she is. One hat after another. This one is very modish. And there's that little dog again. Here she is as Eliza Doolittle before the transformation in My Fair Lady, and here she is after. But she didn't look so bad as Eliza before, when she was selling flowers in the market. The costumes for this film were by Cecil Beaton, and so was a lot of the still photography. This is the famous scene at Ascot. This is a very different role for her. In Wait Until Dark, she played a young blind woman who was stalked by a kind of terrifying figure. Here she is all glammed up. And this is her mom, a baroness, from the Netherlands. Audrey was born in London and her father was British. And here they are walking the streets of Paris. They had a very difficult relationship. It wasn't the warmest in the world. She said, "I'm not beautiful. My mother once called me the ugly duckling." Thanks, Mom. But listed separately, I have a few good features. I mean, I just think this photograph is so glorious and so beautiful. Here she is as a little girl. She wanted to be a dancer badly. She studied for years and then was told she was too tall. So she decided to play bit roles in B movies. And then one day in front of the Hotel de Paris in Monte Carlo, she was standing there, and she was in a movie that was called, I think, a $1 Million Baby in Monaco. And the great French short story writer, Colette, looked at her and said, "There's my Gigi." Gigi, the play was about to open in New York. So Colette came to New York with Gigi, the play, and with her Gigi, Audrey Hepburn. This is the house that she lived in near Geneva, not so far from Geneva, called Les Paisibles, which means the peaceful place. I visited it once, and even though it looks rather grand from the outside, it was anything but inside. There was no interior designer who put his or her hands on it. All of the chairs were well worn, not shabby, but just comfortable. You knew that there was a real person living there. And she might have spent the last years of her life there had it not been for a phone call from UNICEF asking if she would be a Goodwill ambassador. And I guess she felt it was her calling. The first Goodwill ambassador was the actor and entertainer Danny Kaye, so she was the second. And in this role, she went to some of the world's most dangerous, desperate places, and spent time with these children, and all to the good. She became a real activist. Here she is with her friend Givenchy again. And the reason he is here is because in 1993, he decided he wanted to do something for his dear departed friend, and what he did was to design a collection for Barney's in New York. So I was at Town and Country at the time, and we were approached to not only be a co-host for this event, but also to do a piece on the collection, and so we did. This is a book, another book, called Audrey and Givenchy, but they really were very close and trusted friends. This was the cover. This is not Audrey. This is a model, look-alike. And these are some of the clothes. This is the piece that I wrote about Audrey all those several months after her death. You can see her with Avedon there and with Fred Astaire as Avedon. And this blow-up says, Avedon and Penn photographed her. Billy Wilder, Willie Wilder, Blake Edwards, Stanley Donen, and George Cukor, among others, directed her. And Hubert de Givenchy dressed her. And oh, how he dressed her. These are some of the clothes from that collection. Really, again, beautiful, but simple. This man is also beautiful. This is the man that she lived with for the last 13 years of her life, Robert Walters. And he came to the dinner afterwards, and we became friends and have remained friends all this time. I hear from him all the time. He lives in Bel Air. And he was one of the people who led me to UNICEF. This was the issue that we did in May 2003, 10 years after her death. And it was a 20-page section. I love this photograph so much. It's so warm and so inviting. This was my editor's letter at the time. And the photograph is from 1958 picture. She was on the cover of Town and Country way back then. This is the table of contents. And again, I wrote this story. And in doing so, I interviewed one of her sons, Rob Walters, of course, her dear friend Connie Wald, and a couple of other people who told me what it was like to know her and love her. That was her mom on top, and her father, who was a very intimidating man. Here she is again as a little girl. When I was in LA giving this presentation a couple of months ago, her son Luca Dotti from Rome came all the way and was on the dais with me, talking about one of two books he had written about his mother. And he brought his little girl, Marta, who was all of 7 years old, and she looks so much like this photograph of Audrey. Here she is at a christening. The woman beside her is probably her makeup artist or one of her maids with a cigarette. The one thing you should know about Audrey is she had one vice. She was a chain smoker. Here she is with her son, Sean, and with Mel Ferrer. Again, looking incredibly glamorous in Givenchy. Who wouldn't want to know this person? She was just incredibly warm and charming. Here she is when she won the Oscar. She didn't expect to be nominated, and she certainly didn't expect to win. And she gave a very brief speech, and she just was incredibly charming and incredibly grateful. Here she is with Sean. At this point, she was almost retired. This is what we ended the section with, and you might think it's a very strange photograph to be on the pages of Town and Country. But we all thought, those of us on the staff, that it really said so much about what kind of woman she was, and the lengths and depths to which she would go to be in this role as Goodwill Ambassador. Here she is with Avedon. And this is a piece that I wrote for Harper's Bazaar about her relationship with Richard Avedon. After I left Town and Country in 2010, the editor of Harper's Bazaar, Glenda Bailey, called me and said, would I do a piece about Audrey as the muse of Dick Avedon? And I said, yes, I would love to. And that photograph is by Avedon. And then a couple of years later, the ever-smart Glenda Bailey called me again and said, I have this idea. Would you like to do a piece about her granddaughter, Emma Ferrer, who is the son of Sean, the granddaughter of Audrey? I said, well, I met her when she was a little girl. I haven't seen her since. The only problem is she happens to live in Florence, Italy. Hearst was always tight with the budget, so I didn't expect, I thought, well, we'll find somebody in Italy. And she said, well, we'll send you there, of course. And they did. And Emma and I met up in Italy and spent 3 or 4 days, she was an art student at the time, wandering around the city, seeing places. I had lived there years ago, so it was a treat for me to be with her. An absolutely charming young woman who never met her grandmother. And at one point, this is another photograph, at one point I said, well, why don't we watch a film of your grandmother's together? So we went to her father's house, and outside was a barn that had been converted into a screening room. And we watched Sabrina, which of course was about this young girl, very innocent, the daughter of a chauffeur, in love with the scion of this very wealthy family who lived in the big house. And she goes to Europe and comes back and goes from ugly duckling to this absolutely glorious looking creature. And I remember not being able to take my eyes off Emma the entire time we were watching this, because in a sense, she was seeing herself as well. Here she is. Now, the good part of the story is the photographer for this story. Glenda said, the reason I so want you to do this is because there's a photographer that I want to shoot the story, and his name is Michael Avedon, and he is the grandson of Richard Avedon. So what is about Audrey Hepburn that has so captivated so many of us for so many years, and still to this day? I mean, it certainly was how she looked and how she comported herself and her incredible talent. But, you know, you hear this all the time when people say that somebody is beautiful, as beautiful or more beautiful inside than out. I think this was absolutely true of Audrey. This is her son, Luca Dotti, and as I said, he came to be with me in Los Angeles, and I'm just going to show you very quickly some of the shots of him as a little boy. There he is again. There he is with Rob and a beautiful bust of his mother. This is the first book that he did, which was called Audrey in Rome, and he lives in the same house that they lived in as a family. Here she is on the Spanish Steps with Mel, with her husband, Luca, walking the streets of Rome where she could be by herself, and yet every once in a while, a photographer, a paparazzi, would notice her and start to follow her. This is the book called Audrey at Home, and I highly recommend it because it is absolutely charming. It is about how she entertained, how she cooked, how she worked with the woman who did cook for them, and the kind of food that she loved. There are many recipes in the book. And as Lucas said, my mother's favorite food were three things: pasta, pasta, and pasta. This was a rare photograph of her as a ballerina, again with baby Luca, with her husband, Luca again. Her other son lives in Florence, and unfortunately they don't have a great relationship, two boys, which would break their mother's heart. Here she is with Rob, the wonderful Rob. Here she is in, I think, Tibet. This is his wife, who is a wonderful children's illustrator. And here is the wonderful Audrey saying goodbye, but not forever. And I thank you very much. We're going to show a little video right now of her work with UNICEF.
This is Audrey Hepburn in Bangladesh, where I have been seeing at first hand some of the things your support has been making possible. I only wish everyone involved with UNICEF's national committees could have the chance to meet these children and see the difference UNICEF is helping to make in their lives. It's on their behalf that I thank all of you.
Tonight, we meet this remarkable lady. Ladies and gentlemen, Special Ambassador for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, Ms. Audrey Hepburn.
You don't miss your craft, your art?
No, not really. Of course, I look back with enormous happiness on my career, but there's a time for everything. And I think at this point in my life, I am working, but it's for UNICEF. You know, you can't beat it, Larry. It's amazing how resilient they are, how cheerful. They're fabulous. That is also the marvelous part of UNICEF. UNICEF has a wonderful long arm which is trying to reach wherever it is most needed.
It is for leaders, parents, and young people
to remember their own childhood and come to the rescue of those who start life against such heavy odds. Today and now, on this anniversary day of the most comprehensive treaty for the protection and support of children in history. And if this career has left me with something very special, it's left me with this voice, which I can use for the good of children. What could be nicer?
Now we're going to have a little Q&A. Ashley is going to ask me some questions, some of which I may not want to answer.
Can y'all hear me? Okay. Is my big mouth or the microphone? No, that's the microphone. So, you didn't meet Audrey, but you were very close with her significant other, the person she spent the last years of her life with,
Yes.
and also with Luca and Sean.
And
as
Sean,
well.
yes. And Emma. I heard from Emma 3 times today.
What would they say the most favorite thing of Audrey's was?
I think it had to be her authenticity. I mean, she was the real thing. There was nothing false about her. There was no charade. She suffered no fools. And she was just straight out, honest, and she held to her convictions. And you know, in a place like Hollywood and in the movie business, it's so easy to lose sight of that. And she never did, not for one instant.
Did she like Hollywood? She wanted to be a dancer. She wanted to be a ballerina, and by accident ended up in major motion pictures. But was that something that she grew to love? I had read at one point that she did not feel she was talented.
No.
And was shocked that she was even nominated for the awards that she won.
She didn't like Hollywood. And it's not surprising that a woman like that would not like Hollywood. But she had a very good friend there, Connie Wald, who lived in Beverly Hills. And whenever Audrey would come, at this time she was living in Switzerland, she would stay with Connie. She didn't stay in a hotel. She never wanted to stay in a hotel. For her, Connie's house was home. And so she couldn't get out of there fast enough, really. I mean, she was not a Hollywood type in any way.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that Rob was with her at the end of her life. Who do you think was the greatest love of her life? William
Rob,
Holden?
without a question.
Rob,
Without question.
more so than William Holden? Or
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, that was a fling. That was a fling. And also, she also had an affair with Albert Finney when they were filming Two for the Road. But no, Rob was the man that she trusted the most, who understood her the most, who let her be herself.
Not George Peppard?
Never. He didn't even, they didn't get along.
They didn't
They
get
didn't
along.
get along on the set, no.
In Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
You know, that happens sometimes.
Okay, I have some questions from the audience for you. I want to get to these. This goes to that. Are these true? William Holden said that she was the love of his life. She had affairs with Albert Finney, you just confirmed that. Beverly Allardson, Ben Gazzara.
Oh, Ben Gazzara, yeah, Ben Gazzara.
Should I get that right?
Yeah, Ben Gazzara, yes, they did have a brief affair. I think she was very much in love with Sean Ferrer, and she thought she was in love with Luca Dotti, but neither of those men were very kind. And Rob is the sort of the epitome of kindness, and was very gentle with her.
We have a couple more. Let's see what the next one is. So I'm not sure who this, Beverly Ellerton, am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
But that apparently wasn't. Okay. Let's see. What is the title of Audrey's last movie? What year and who directed it?
It was Always, and it was with Richard Dreyfuss, and I think it was directed by Peter Bogdanovich.
Okay. Do you think that I think I'm getting this right. Do you think that her young life in occupied Netherlands prepared her for her UNICEF role?
Absolutely. No question about it. I mean, people always look at her and think, oh, she looks sort of anorexic. But in fact, that had a lot to do with her diet as a young child and eating all the wrong foods, hardly nutritional in any way. And it was a very hard life, a very demanding life as a child. And she saw a lot of death, and she saw a lot of people in pain and suffering, and I think she never forgot that. And then she had 2 children of her own after waiting for a while, and she always had a very soft spot in her heart for children, and I think this opportunity was, I think if you had to say what was more important to her, her movies, her screen career, or UNICEF, I think she would say UNICEF.
And she also had a love for animals. She had the Yorkshire Terrier, but also a fawn?
She had a fawn, yes. Little baby fawn. And she had Jack Russell Terriers. Those were Rob's. He brought them into her life. And yeah, I mean, everything that you could think of that was sort of, almost like she was almost like a wood sprite. And I remember that she was in a movie with Tony Perkins, and she played this sort of Rima of the jungle. And he gives a speech at the end, Tony Perkins, where he talks about her being like the animals in the forest and like the wildlife in the forest. And every time I see those few lines, I think that is what Audrey must have been like.
Givenchy adored her, and she was a muse for him. No romance.
Oh, God, no. He had his own things going on. There you go. Yeah, but he did love her, and in fact, when she first came to see him, he was told that a Miss Hepburn was wanting to make an appointment with him. Well, he thought it was Katharine Hepburn. And this young girl showed up, and she really wasn't known at that time. And he sort of was a little dismissive and said, well, you can look at these clothes on the rack, but I really can't make anything for you. And so in the movie Sabrina, those were the clothes that she just picked herself off this rack of clothes.
Oh, wow, that's great.
But he did love her. He's done a couple of exhibitions in Europe recently. He's now pretty old and his eyesight isn't very good, but a true gentleman. And today, at a presentation that I gave earlier, Rosemary Bravo, who used to be the head of Saks Fifth Avenue, and also the CEO of Burberry, a wonderful woman. She told a wonderful story about Givenchy and how he had come to give a fashion show when she was at iMagnin on Valentine's Day. And Rosemary thought, gee, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get Audrey Hepburn to come and be a surprise guest? And somehow they pulled it off. Nobody knew. She was the only person who knew, and at a certain point at the end of the show, when usually the models come around and they flanked the designer, nobody was there, and he was a little bit put out by it. And then turned around, and there she was standing there. And it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, she said he was extremely emotional.
Yes. Yeah.
And her going was contingent on two things. One was that it'd be a surprise, and the second?
That iMagnin make a donation to UNICEF.
It was a huge commitment to her. How many years was she a UNICEF ambassador?
Gosh, I honestly don't know. I know she started in the 1960s, because by then she had really mostly retired. But I guess it was about 10 years.
Okay. I have a question, actually, for you. I thought there was another one here about the UNICEF. But there's a question for you. So we're going to segue. What is your background in writing, besides...
I never even thought about being a writer. I was a high school English teacher in New Jersey. And one day I quit my job on the last day of school and said, I'm too young to teach. Especially when one of my classes was composed of the boys' soccer team. And they were not interested in the red badge of courage, I can assure you. So I, on a whim, went to Italy, and I spent 4 months there with whatever money I had saved. And after about 4 months, I said, okay, it's time to go home. You have to face reality. But the one thing I said to myself was, I'm going to get a job in New York. I want to be in New York. And just when I was about to give up on that and go back to teaching, I saw an ad, and this is absolutely true, in the Help Wanted section of the New York Times, which called for a research associate for an unnamed travel magazine. I didn't even know what a research associate was. It turned out to be a job as a fact checker, which is an entry-level job in editorial. So that's how I started, and I had always loved literature. I had always read avidly as a child. I came from a middle-class family who loved reading, and I'd sit in one part of the living room, and my mother would sit at another, and my father another, and we'd be reading books. But as I started to fact check, and fact checking is just verifying facts in preparation for the publication of a story, I started to see how writers wrote and how editors edited. Because not every article that came in was a perfect piece of writing. And sometimes a lot had to be done with it. So by and by, I happened to be working for Holiday Magazine at a time when it was at a crossroads. The parent company wasn't doing well. So they kept giving assignments to young Turks on the staff like me. And I started getting promotions. I never asked for a raise. I never asked for a promotion. And that's the way it was for most of my career. I left Holiday in 1971 and went to Travel and Leisure. I became editor-in-chief of Travel and Leisure in 1975. Became editorial director of all the magazines in the late 1980s, and then I was hankering to edit a magazine again, and the opportunity for Town and Country came, and I said, I'll only do it if I don't have to put a lot of ladies from Texas, because at the time that's what they were doing, and you let me change it the way I want to change it. And they did.
Yeah, you changed that dramatically. I mean, the entire focus of the publication, which was a risk,
Yes,
and it paid off.
it did.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, what do you think right now, if Audrey could come back and give us all sort of a message, what do you think that her, besides obviously supporting UNICEF, but what do you think? I know that her sons don't talk to each other, correct, right now. And I don't know if Emma the granddaughter is planning on continuing in her grandmother's footsteps.
She could, but she's also a very talented artist and sculptor. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, I think in her mind's eye, it would be nice if something happened along those lines.
Yeah.
I think Audrey would be distressed. I think she would be incredibly upset about how people, including her sons, are not getting along. And this kind of divisiveness that we have, not only in this country, but in many other places as well, because this is a woman who thrived on harmony. And to a certain extent, that often means compromise, and being able to be flexible and to bend and to work things out. So I think the idea of having a meeting of minds, whether it be among individuals or countries, would be very important to her.
What is your favorite thing about Audrey Hepburn? What is the one thing that you think of?
Apart from being a great actress and a great human being, I think she was kind, and I think that kindness goes a long, long way. I saw something on the news, I think it was this morning, about how they're teaching in certain schools, they're teaching children the importance of kindness. And, we hear about kids being bullied and, this kind of arrogance among kids. And when, in fact, they should be working together and being together and being for each other.
We're going to wrap so that you all can meet her and chat with her individually out and have some cocktails and
Maybe more than one.
maybe more than one. Thank you so very, very much for joining us tonight.